This final keynote comes from a fellow that I consider one of the wisest thinkers in the field of interaction design. How we interact with the Internet of Things in a way that's concise and clear and never confusing. So if you're looking for those answers, and these answers are really fundamental to the success of any IoT product or service, Andy's got them. He's the APAC Regional Design Director for Fjord Accenture, there we go. And he helps clients design living surfaces that combine sense and accessibility. Please welcome Andy.
Thanks. Thanks. Hi, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak. I've just realized that I took a bottle of water. I've got nowhere to put it, so I shall carry it. I'm going to talk about three things today. One is a little sort of précis around a thing we call living services. And then I'm going to have a little brief kind of touch on the structure of those. But I don't really have the time to go into depth on that. And I can kind of point you to some material around that. And then I have a bit of a plea, but also I wanted to give you an experience and talk about what this means from a design perspective. Because both Martin and Lee touched on this. The good news is, we're in an amazing space, and there's all sorts of technology and incredible things going on. The bad news for most of the people sitting in this room is that end users don't care. They really don't care about most of the stuff that you're producing in terms of the technology. If you hands up who, there's probably someone in here actually, but hands up who knows how their engine management system works in their car. All right, there we go. Well, someone kind of went, I don't. And the long and short of it is, nor does the mechanic anymore. If that goes wrong, they just replace it most of the time. So one of the things that's happened is we've come this kind of long way, and I don't really need to tell you this in this audience. You've got, the 90s changed everything. The web happened one day. Where's Lee? When Amazon come to Australia, you'll know how that changed everyone's shopping habits and searching habits and all of those things. And then that stuff all went mobile, really gave rise to the explosion properly of social media and the whole kind of app ecosystem and everything you know. And now we are in this era which we're calling the beginning of living services. And they're not something that replaces the other, they overlay on each other. IoT is key to allowing us to create these new types of services, to create living services. And it's a few different converging forces are allowing this to happen. One of which is the massive kind of drop in the prices of things like sensors, permanent connectivity in other places in the world, not so much in Australia, but it'll come. And you've got this convergence, and also about experiences. I'm not going to touch so much on the experience thing at the moment. So when we talk about living services, we talk about these services that are adaptive to and hyper-tailored. And by which, for the big challenge for some of our clients is how do they deliver an experience that is to a demographic of one. So how are you delivering hyper-personalized experiences so that my experience of, say, AT&T is different from Mark's, but it still feels like AT&T. Look at how well Martin's had primed me beforehand to talk about his brand. They're proximate and intimate, right? So that it's wearables and nearables and everything you're making. Right? So that's where you come in. They're all around us and they're surrounding us. And they're really kind of intimate to our lives, and they're evolving and they're learning. Data is indeed the oxygen to that. And we talk about this quite a lot, actually, so it's nice to hear that same phrase, that for our designers, in classic sort of Bauhaus terms, designers work with different elements such as balance and hierarchy and color and form and those things. And data is one of those elements that they now need to think about working with. And that is, what data would we need to make this amazing experience? But there's a flip side of that, which is, what data don't we need? And I'll come to that a little bit later. Sorry, I'm just going to take this drink. I feel like this is a microphone, and I'm going to put it down. Hang on. Or I feel like I'm at a sort of cocktail evening with a glass of wine. So as those things are evolving and they feel like they're alive, they start to change our lives. So they take off, they're automating low maintenance decisions. And this is one of my sort of complaints about having worked actually in Switzerland with iHome Lab in Lucerne is you've got a kind of massive load of technology and sensors and all sorts of stuff. As one colleague there said, it sensed the shit out of everything. That's our philosophy. You've got all that stuff. And we talk about in our trends report the difference between sort of smart homes and helpful homes. So at the moment, a lot of those things send you a notification to tell you your house is on fire. That's not very useful. That's not helpful, right? That's, in fact, anxiety producing. What's more helpful is your stove caught fire, but we've put it out, or we've called the fire brigade and everything's okay. Right? And we've notified all of your family. So that sort of proactive nature of those things, where things become helpful and are not just kind of sensing stuff. Does anyone on their smartphone, particularly their iPhones, anyone have a plethora of red badges, and particularly some people who don't clear their email, so that you just have an email badge that says, 25,000 unread emails? There's a few nods here. The danger is you just make that worse, right? Of course, they're like kind of little sort of birds in a nest going beep, 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 please feed me, and that all of those devices now need tending to. And so what the living services do is really try and take away that noise and make those things speak to each other, so they're taking away a lot of those kind of, they're automating a lot of those low maintenance decisions. And they learn and adapt, and they get to know us. Right? The crowd data part is important, but I'm going to skip over it now. But the important thing is, obviously, the sort of aggregate data gives you an amazing picture, particularly in sort of healthcare spaces and things like that. And lastly, they take things off the thinking list. The trouble is, for us, that designing them is still quite largely unexplored territory. And by designing them, I don't mean the technology side of things. I get that that's going on. What I'm talking about is the human interaction of that and how they have a place in our lives. Because what we're sort of in a current position of, you're starting to see sort of home ecosystems build up, but at the moment there's a lot of kind of kneeling around in cupboards, kind of plugging and replugging stuff. There's a lot of kind of logging into interfaces that don't make any sense to kind of reboot or kind of jig the connectivity. There's a lot of stuff that just drops out. So we also then thinking about living services, there's a lot of complexity going on there. So what do we do? So we look at living services in this way. We have a North Star. So you really need, as an organization, if you're going to deliver a living service, this North Star, what's your purpose and intent in the world? And that's very, very important. You have a rule book. So this is the kind of if this, then that part. And trigger moments. So that could be a doctor's appointment saying to me, you need to change your diet because you're in danger of diabetes. Could be my watch telling me something. Could be my stove on fire. But it could be lots of other things as well. And you'll all know it from things like Google Now, or if you need to leave now because traffic's heavy, and those things. There's lots of different sources of data that serve these little micro moments. And really, life is made up of micro moments. It's not actually made up kind of big picture stuff. If you think of all the things that are important to you in your life and your memories of them, your memories will be of these tiny little snapshots. It's the smile of someone. It's the kind of tiny moments in life. And actually, that's where all the kind of the delight comes in. And finally, and this is where data comes in, you need this atomized profile. You need to be pulling in all these data sets. So that's the sort of template. And there's a lot more depth to that. That's all well and good, but at the moment we've got this thing going on where we've got this kind of convergence of two things, which is AI-driven interfaces, but they are blinking lights in this AI in a cylinder with blinking lights on top, as if that would ever amount to anything. So, R2-D2 is probably the most annoying droid from Star Wars, right? If you took a toddler and kind of gave him some smarts, that's R2-D2. He's a little kind of stamping dustbin. the question is, right, as you're starting to reduce the amount of interface and context for those things, and you've just got a blinking light and a lady in a can to speak to you, how do you then design for an invisible UI? Because there's an awful lot of stuff that comes with the context on visual context or text. You know, even when you do a search query on Google as opposed to Google Now, that you don't have. So you've got these kind of algorithmically driven engines providing the kind of the one true answer, which often isn't, and at the same time you're actually taking away all the context. So back to my mechanic example, you know, it used to be the mechanic pops open the bonnet and can see from all sorts of other bits, like there's some oil splatters on there, which makes me think there's something wrong with the seal on a pump. A lot of that stuff just gone away, and it's gone away for all of us too. Now, you might have heard that you know, AI is the new UI. So AI is the new user interface. But the sort of other part to that is that personality is the new UX. So if you're going to deliver a living service, you really need to think about, well, what's the personality? I really like K2SO because he has attitude. I don't know if everyone's seen Rogue One, but there's a bit in it when they say, oh, something kind of went wrong when we reprogrammed him. And so he's just kind of like, he's now not a toddler, he's like a kind of stroppy teenager. He's just, so K2SO, you stay here, and he's like, and rolls his eyes, kind of. Personality is really important because personality is made up of values. So that's that North Star. And it's expressed through behaviors, right? And our behaviors and interactions are our personalities. And so really understanding that, and it's particularly true of voice-driven and chat-driven experiences, but it's very, very true of everything else. If I'm still Andy Polaine when I'm interacting with Mark, but also when I'm interacting with my daughter or my wife or a client, and you know, but you're slightly adjusting your personality to each of those things. And in some cases, you're reflecting the other person, because that's how we show empathy. So that provides a real challenge for designers, because if everything's constantly adjusting and changing, you're back to that thing of, well, we're designing for an experience of one-to-one, so for millions. And the only way for that to really work is for you to have a very, very clear North Star and a set of values of, well, what's your purpose in the world? So back to those three examples of Apple, Google, and Amazon. They've all got different business models. They've all got a different set of values. They've got a different set of values about what they do with data and how they think about data. And I'm not here to make a judgment of those. Those are three different kind of ways of thinking, also about open and closed systems and so forth. But it's really, really important to have that kind of clear personality so when it comes to designing things that people are going to interact with as human beings. And I was really glad you talked about life experiences. Because the very last part of this, and this is kind of my sort of plea, I would say to you, is that as we create a lot of services and systems that are becoming more and more humanized, so many of what the things that you are, that I've looked at out there and the people in here are involved in making, are happening in the background. So a lot of the stuff that Martin talked about, and I said sort of nobody cares about that, kind of rudely, was someone needs to care about that. And a lot of us do care about that. But actually, the way it gets surfaced in terms of the human interactions is very, very simplified. It really is a voice coming out of a can with some blinking lights at the moment. What's powerful about that as we humanize those interactions is that we all have the mental model of how to interact with human beings, except for Donald Trump. And in that situation, we kind of know that there are certain kinds of things that imply social contracts. So if I was to whisper something to Mark, he would know by the context around me communicating that he probably shouldn't kind of tweet it immediately or shout it across the room. On the other hand, if I kind of walked in the door and go, "What's up, Mark?" I'm signaling to the rest of the room of like, hey, I know Mark, everyone, and you know, look how great we are and all of that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of kind of social cues that go in with all of that we instinctively understand. And the danger of a sort of heavy technology bias is that we overlook that. And the danger is that you seduce people into a certain kind of interaction that, because it's quite humanized, they believe that this AI, which isn't that intelligent at the moment, understands all of that context. And I'll give you an example of it. I was talking about, with one of our designers about a project, and he was saying, well, maybe, what about, with voice UI, what about if Alexa was doing a bank transfer for me? And I said, okay, let's role play that. And one of the best ways to do it is to act it out, because we're so finely tuned to human interactions. And I said, so I'll be Alexa, I'll be Alexa and you be you. And he said, okay, Alexa, transfer $100 to Andy Polaine. And I went, okay, from which account? And he said, oh, my savings account. And I said, I'm Alexa. What's your PIN number? And he went, it's 3. Oh, I nearly said it. I nearly said my PIN number out loud. He was so kind of like into the interaction, he completely forgot that he was in a room with a load of other people. And it was really fascinating, because as soon as you act those out, you kind of see what's going on. So really, my sort of plea for that is, if you're going to design any of these things, there's an implied social contract that you actually need to honor in that. And it's very subtle, and it needs exploring. And that's, for us, one of the sort of big design challenges. And ultimately, it's why we're really looking at designing for life. Thanks.